The text arrived on a Tuesday evening while I was still at work. Family dinner at Bellini's, 7:30 p.m. Important announcement. My brother had sent it to our family group chat. No context, no explanation, just those few words. But something about that word, important, made my stomach twist. In my family, important usually meant something that had nothing to do with me. I'm Maya Chen, 28 years old, and despite working as a pediatric physical therapist helping children walk again after accidents, I've always felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own family. My shift ended at 6:45, leaving me just enough time to make it to Bellini's. I debated changing out of my work clothes, navy scrubs with cartoon animals printed on them, but there wasn't time. Besides, my family had seen me in worse. The restaurant parking lot was almost full when I arrived. Golden hour sunlight streamed across the windshield as I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles under my eyes from a 12-hour shift, hair pulled back in a messy bun. Not exactly dinner party ready, but it would have to do. Just breathe, I whispered to myself. Maybe this time will be different. I'd been telling myself that for years. Inside Bellini's, the hostess led me past tables of laughing couples and families to a private room in the back. Before I even turned the corner, I heard my brother Jackson's booming laugh. He always had a way of filling a room with his presence. And then I said, "That's not a contract. That's barely a napkin with some scribbles," Jackson was saying as I walked in. Everyone erupted in laughter. My father, Richard, clapped him on the shoulder, pride evident in his eyes. My mother, Vivian, was wiping away tears of laughter. Even my grandmother, Eleanor, who rarely showed emotion, was smiling widely. They didn't notice me standing in the doorway. They never did. Vivian looked up first. "Oh, Maya, you made it." Not a question, not quite welcome either. Just an acknowledgement of my existence. "Sorry I'm late. Work ran over." I slid into the only empty chair, noticeably separate from the rest of the table setting. The waiter had to bring an extra place setting just for me. "Still wearing those children's pajamas." "I see," Jackson said, eyeing my scrubs. At 32, my brother was a corporate lawyer with an expensive suit collection and an even more expensive apartment downtown. They're scrubs. "I help kids walk again, remember?" I replied, trying to keep my voice light. Yes, very noble," my mother said dismissively before turning back to Jackson. "Tell them about the news, honey." Jackson stood up dramatically, champagne glass in hand. Behind him, I noticed for the first time, was a banner I hadn't seen when I walked in. "Congratulations to our real son," it proclaimed in glittering gold letters. My heart froze. "Real son? As you all know," Jackson began, his voice performative, "I've been fascinated with ancestry lately. So I did one of those DNA tests." I sat there, my throat tightening as he continued. "And it turns out I'm 100% biologically mom and dad's. Not adopted, not a mix-up at the hospital. Their genuine biological son. Can you believe it? All these years we thought there might have been a donor involved because of mom's fertility treatments. But nope, I'm the real deal." Everyone cheered. My father wiped away what looked like an actual tear. My mother beamed with pride I'd never seen directed at me. To Jackson, my father toasted, our flesh and blood. I sat there, my untouched water glass sweating onto the tablecloth. No one looked at me. No one seemed to remember I was there at all. So, I finally spoke, my voice smaller than I intended. "What does this mean about me?" The table fell silent. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My father suddenly became fascinated with the pattern on his necktie. Jackson, never one for subtlety, laughed. "Well, sis, the doctors always said there were 2 embryos during the fertility treatments. Looks like I'm the biological one, and you're something else." "Something else," I repeated numbly. "It doesn't change anything," my mother said quickly, not quite meeting my eyes. "You're still family. Sort of. There it was. 28 years of feeling like I didn't quite fit, of working twice as hard for half the recognition, of making myself smaller to avoid being in the way. 28 years of sort of belonging. Do you want to see the results?" Jackson was already pulling out his phone, eager to show everyone the proof of his belonging. As if the banner wasn't enough, I felt like I was underwater, their voices muffled and distant. My grandmother Eleanor was watching me from across the table, her eyes sharp and knowing in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Maya has always been different," my mother was saying to no one in particular. "This explains so much. Different. That word had followed me my entire life. Different interests, different goals, different temperament. I'd always thought it was just personality, but now, "Excuse me," I mumbled, pushing back from the table. Restroom. No one acknowledged me as I left. The conversation had already moved on, like a stream flowing around a forgotten stone. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. The restaurant's ambient noise washed over me. Clinking glasses, casual laughter, the soft murmur of normal families having normal dinners without their worlds coming apart. "Miss Chen?" I looked up to see one of the restaurant staff watching me with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. I nodded automatically. "Fine, I'm fine." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I was asked to give you this." He handed me a cream-colored envelope with just my name written across the front. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, like someone who had taken great care with each letter. "Who gave you this?" I asked, but he was already walking away, disappearing back into the kitchen. I stared down at the envelope, just Maya in careful script. My hands trembled as I held it. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Hadn't I had enough revelations for one night? But something about the weight of it, the care taken with my name, pulled at me. I slipped into an empty alcove and carefully opened the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded 3 times. The same careful handwriting filled the page. "Maya, if you're reading this, then they've finally told you something about your past, though I suspect they've only shared enough to hurt you, not enough to heal you. I've kept this secret for too long, bound by promises I should have broken years ago. Your mother, your real mother, was my daughter's college roommate. Her name was Sofia Rivera. She was brilliant, fierce, and loved you more than life itself. She didn't abandon you. She died when you were 6 months old. A brain aneurysm, sudden and unexpected. She was only 24. Vivian was there when it happened. They were best friends once. She promised to care for you as her own, and I believed her. I was wrong. I've watched for years as they pushed you aside, as they treated you like an obligation rather than the gift you are. I've seen you shrink yourself to fit into spaces they never made room for you in. I have Sophia's journals, her photos, her letters to you. I've kept them safe, waiting for the day you were ready to know the truth. I'm staying at the Westbrook Hotel, room 412. Come tonight if you want to know more. It's time you knew who you really are. With love and regret, Eleanor, your grandmother. Though not by blood, I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking harder with each pass. Eleanor, my grandmother, who wasn't my grandmother, had known all along. Every Christmas dinner, every family gathering, every stilted birthday celebration, she had known. My mother's name was Sofia Rivera, not Vivian Chen. I had a mother with a name, a history, a face I'd never seen. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Through the doorway, I could see my family. No, not my family. Still celebrating. Jackson at the center of attention as always. They hadn't even noticed I was gone. I walked back to the table and picked up my purse. "I have to go," I said, my voice stronger than it had been all night. Vivian glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "We haven't even ordered dinner yet." "Emergency at work," one lied. "A patient needs me," Jackson smirked. "Always the responsible one, aren't you? Can't even take one night off to celebrate." I looked at him, really looked at him, possibly for the last time. My brother, who wasn't my brother, the golden child, the real son. "Congratulations on being real," I said softly. "I'm going to find out who I am." Eleanor's eyes met mine across the table. A slight nod, almost imperceptible. I walked out of Bellini's without looking back, the weight of the letter in my pocket pulling me forward into a future I never knew was waiting. The night air hit my face as I pushed through Bellini's double doors. My car keys dug into my palm, the metal edges a sharp reminder that this was real, not some bizarre nightmare I could wake from. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, engine off, staring at nothing. 28 years of memories swirled through my mind like autumn leaves caught in a windstorm. The time I won the science fair in 6th grade, and Vivian merely nodded while she spent hours framing Jackson's participation certificate. The graduation, where Richard remembered to bring flowers for Jackson's girlfriend, but not for me. The countless dinners where my voice seemed to evaporate before reaching anyone's ears. All those moments I'd excused away as normal family dynamics. All those nights I'd convinced myself I was being too sensitive. I pulled out the letter and read it again. My mother's name was Sofia Rivera. She died when I was just 6 months old. She hadn't abandoned me. She'd been taken from me. The Westbrook Hotel was only 15 minutes from Bellini's, but the drive stretched like taffy. Every stoplight seemed to last an eternity. I rehearsed what I'd say to Eleanor, this woman who'd pretended to be my grandmother for almost 3 decades while holding the truth hostage. The hotel lobby gleamed under soft lighting, all marble and polished brass. The front desk clerk barely looked up as I walked past, heading straight for the elevators as if I belonged there. As if I belonged anywhere. 4th floor, room 412. My knuckles hovered over the door for a long moment before I finally knocked, 3 soft taps that felt like thunder in my ears. The door opened almost immediately. Eleanor stood there, not in her usual formal attire but in a simple sweater and slacks. Without her pearls and perfectly coiffed hair, she looked smaller, more human. "Maya," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "You came." She reached for me and I stiffened. She noticed and dropped her hands, stepping back to let me enter. The hotel room was spacious, with 2 queen beds and a sitting area near a large window overlooking the city. On the table sat a worn leather box, the kind people once used for important documents before everything went digital. "Would you like some tea?" Eleanor asked, gesturing to a small tray with a kettle and cups. I shook my head. "I want the truth. All of it." She nodded, sitting on the edge of one bed while I took the armchair across from her. A careful distance between us. "Where should I start?" she asked, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "From the beginning," I said. "Who was Sofia Rivera?" Eleanor's face softened. "Sofia was my daughter Caroline's roommate at Berkeley. They were inseparable from freshman year. Sofia was studying astrophysics' brilliant mind, could solve equations that would make most people's heads spin, but she was also vibrant, full of life. She loved salsa dancing and had this incredible laugh that would make everyone around her smile. I tried to picture this woman, my mother, dancing, laughing, solving equations. It was like trying to grasp water. What did she look like? My voice cracked on the question. Eleanor reached for the leather box and opened it carefully. She pulled out a photograph, slightly faded around the edges, and handed it to me. 2 young women smiled back at me, arms around each other's shoulders, standing in front of a fountain. One was clearly a younger version of Eleanor's daughter Caroline, who I'd met a few times at family gatherings. The other, my breath caught, she had my eyes. My exact eyes, down to the slight upward tilt at the corners. Her hair was curlier than mine, her smile wider, but there was no mistaking it. I was looking at my mother. "That was taken their junior year," Eleanor said softly. "Before everything happened." "Before what?" she sighed. "Before Sofia met your father. Before she got pregnant. Before Vivian showed her true colors." I looked up sharply. "My father? Who was he?" "His name was Daniel Reyes. He was a graduate student in astronomy. They were madly in love, planning to get married after graduation. But then," Eleanor's voice faltered, "then what? There was an accident. Daniel was driving home from the observatory late one night. They think he fell asleep at the wheel. He went off a cliff on Mountain Road. Sofia was devastated. Another loss, another piece of my history erased before I could ever know it. And then she found out she was pregnant with me." Eleanor nodded. "She was only 23, suddenly alone and expecting a baby. But Maya, she was so happy about you. Terrified, yes, but determined to give you the best life possible." She reached into the box again and pulled out a small leather journal. This was her pregnancy journal. She wrote to you almost every day. My hands trembled as I took it from her. The leather was soft from years of handling, the pages yellowed at the edges. I opened to a random entry, May 12, 1995. "My little star, you've been kicking up a storm today. The doctor says you're right on schedule, growing perfectly. I played Mozart for you this morning, and you seem to dance along already, a music lover like your dad. I found a tiny pair of astronomy-themed pajamas today. Couldn't resist buying them, even though you won't wear them for months yet. They have little stars and moons all over them. Daniel would have loved them. Some days I'm so scared, little one. The world is big and sometimes harsh, and I worry I won't be enough for you. But then you kick, and I remember, We have each other. We'll be a team, you and me against the world. I can't wait to meet you, to see whose eyes you have, to count your fingers and toes. You are already so loved. Always and forever. Mom, tears splashed onto the page before I realized I was crying. I quickly wiped them away, afraid of damaging this precious link to a woman I'd never known. A woman who had loved me, who had wanted me, who had already made space for me in her heart. She died 6 months after you were born, Eleanor continued, her voice thick with emotion. An aneurysm. There were no warning signs. 1 minute she was singing to you, the next. I closed my eyes. The pain surprisingly sharp for someone I had no conscious memory of. And that's when Vivian took me in? Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. Vivian and Sophia had been best friends since high school. They were like sisters. When Sophia died, Vivian was devastated too, in her own way. She and Richard had been trying to have a baby for years without success. They were just starting fertility treatments. So I was what? Convenient? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. No, Eleanor said quickly. At least, I don't think it started that way. I think Vivian genuinely wanted to honor her friendship with Sophia by raising you. And you were such a beautiful baby, so easy to love. What changed? Eleanor looked down at her hands. 6 months after they took you in, Vivian discovered she was pregnant with Jackson. The fertility treatments had worked. And suddenly, there were 2 of you. The pieces started falling into place. And she didn't have enough love for both of us. I don't think Vivian knows how to love without conditions, Eleanor said carefully. When Jackson was born, he was everything she'd fought for, everything she'd dreamed of, her biological child, and you. I was a reminder of someone else I finished, a responsibility, not a choice. Eleanor nodded sadly. I tried to stay involved in your life. I wanted to make sure you knew about Sophia, about your heritage. But Vivian insisted it would only confuse you. She said clean breaks were better, that you should consider yourself fully a Chen. Richard went along with whatever she decided, as always. And you just agreed? For 28 years? I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. I was wrong, Eleanor admitted, her eyes filling with tears again. I told myself I was respecting their parenting choices. I told myself at least this way, I could still be in your life, still watch over you. But the truth is, I was a coward. Every time I saw them favor Jackson, every time I saw you try so hard for even a scrap of their attention. I should have told you years ago. Why now? I asked. Why tonight? Because of that ridiculous dinner. That banner. Eleanor's voice hardened. Jackson called me yesterday, told me about his DNA test results, said they were having a special celebration to announce. He was their old son. I knew what that would do to you. I knew it was finally time. She reached into the leather box one more time and pulled out a sealed envelope. Unlike the first one, this one was clearly old. The paper yellowed, the seal slightly cracked with age. Sophia wrote this for you before you were born, Eleanor said softly. She asked me to keep it safe, to give it to you when you were old enough to understand. I think the time is now. I took the envelope with reverence. My name was written on the front, in handwriting. I now recognized from the journal my mother's handwriting. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. This was the last thing she'd ever written to me, words she'd chosen carefully, never knowing she wouldn't be there to say them in person. I'll give you some privacy, Eleanor said, standing up. I'll be right outside if you need me. When the door closed behind her, one carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, something has happened to me, and I am so sorry for leaving you. That was never my plan. We were going to have adventures together, you and I. I was going to teach you about the stars and watch you grow into the amazing person I already know you will be. I want you to know these things. You were created in love. Your father and I wanted you desperately, dreamed of you, planned for you. You were never a mistake or an accident. You are named after Maya Angelou, because I hope you will rise again and again, no matter what life throws at you. The universe is made of stardust, and so are you. When you look at the night sky, know that the same elements that created those distant suns also created you. You are cosmic, infinite, miraculous. If I'm not there to tell you every day, please know that I love you with every atom of my being. My love doesn't end just because I do. Be brave, my little star. Be kind. Be curious. Be yourself. Always. I will love you forever, across time and space. Mom Sophia, I pressed the letter to my chest, and finally let the tears come, not in quiet drops, but in heaving sobs that seemed to rise from the very core of me. I cried for the mother I'd never known, for the love I'd been denied, for the child I'd been who'd never understood why she wasn't enough. When Eleanor knocked softly and came back in, her own eyes red-rimmed, I looked up at her with a question that had been burning inside me since I'd read her first letter. Do you have a picture of her holding me? Of us together? Eleanor smiled through her tears. I have a whole album. Would you like to see? As she sat beside me, opening another book from the leather box, I felt something inside me shift and settle. For the first time in my life, I wasn't an afterthought or an add-on. I was Sofia Rivera's daughter. I was wanted, I was loved, and that was just the beginning of my story. Eleanor and I stayed up until dawn, poring over every photograph, every letter, every scrap of my mother's life she had preserved. There were pictures of Sophia pregnant, her hands cradling her belly, her face radiant. Pictures of her holding me as a newborn, exhausted but beaming with a joy so pure it made my chest ache. Videos on an ancient camcorder that Eleanor had converted to digital, my mother singing lullabies in Spanish, her voice soft and melodic. She called you her estrellita, her little star, Eleanor explained, as we watched Sophia rock infant me to sleep. Because she said you came to her from the cosmos, just like the stars she studied. Somehow, learning about the mother I'd never known felt like remembering rather than discovering. The way Sophia tucked her hair behind her ear just like I did. Her tendency to hum when concentrating another habit I'd never understood the origin of. I need to ask you something, I said as we sat on the hotel balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky in pinks and oranges. Why did you stay in my life? Why didn't you cut ties with the Chins after they shut you out? Eleanor sipped her tea, her profile outlined in golden light. Because you have her eyes, she said simply. Every time I looked at you, I saw Sophia. I couldn't abandon her daughter, even if it meant playing by Vivian's rules. I nodded, understanding for the first time the compromise she'd made. So all those Christmases, those birthdays when you'd pull me aside and tell me how special I was, how proud you were of me. I was speaking for Sophia, she finished, saying the things she would have said if she could. We fell silent, watching birds swoop between buildings as the city slowly woke up. What happens now? I finally asked. Eleanor turned to face me, her eyes serious. That's entirely up to you, Maya. You can confront Vivian and Richard, demand answers, make them acknowledge what they've done. Or you can walk away, start fresh with the truth. Either way, I'll support you. I thought about going back to that house, about sitting across from Vivian and Richard at their perfectly set dining table, about demanding the truth after 28 years of lies. I need time, I decided. I need space to figure out who I am now. You're welcome to stay here, Eleanor offered. I've booked the room for a week. I shook my head. Thank you, but I need my own space. I paused, realizing something. I need to know more about my mother's culture, her background. She wrote to me in Spanish. Was she? Cuban, Eleanor supplied. Her parents came to the U.S. when she was 5. They passed away before you were born. Car accident when Sophia was in college. That's part of why she and Caroline became so close. They were both orphans in a way. Cuban. I had heritage, ancestry, blood connections I'd never known about. All those years I'd felt out of place in the Chen family's Chinese-American traditions, not because I was ungrateful, as Vivian often implied, but because some part of me had been reaching for something else, something lost. My phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. Where did you go last night? Mom's pissed. I turned off my phone without replying. I have the weekend off work, I told Eleanor. I think I'm going to drive up to my apartment, pack a bag, and go somewhere quiet to think. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Take this. She handed me the leather box with all of Sophia's belongings. They belong to you now. Before I left, she gave me one more thing, a delicate gold necklace with a tiny star pendant. Sophia wore this every day. She said it reminded her that even when we feel small, we're made of the same stuff as stars. I fastened it around my neck, the pendant resting just below my collarbone, and felt something click into place. My apartment felt strange when I returned, like walking into a movie set of someone else's life. Photos of the Chens on the refrigerator, books on physical therapy neatly lined on shelves. Everything tidy, organized, practical. Nothing that spoke of stars or cosmic connections or Cuban heritage. I moved on autopilot, packing essentials into a duffel bag. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I paused at my bookshelf, fingers trailing over the spines until they landed on a dog-eared copy of Maya Angelou's poems, a book I'd bought myself in college. Drawn to it for reasons I couldn't explain at the time. Named for Maya Angelou, because my mother hoped I would rise. I slipped the book into my bag. My phone, now turned back on, chimed repeatedly with messages from Vivian, Richard, even Jackson. I ignored them all, except for a text from my supervisor at the clinic, confirming I could take a week of my saved vacation time. Freedom, at least temporarily, lay ahead of me. I had just zipped my bag when a sharp knock at the door made me freeze. I knew that knock 3 rapid taps, an impatient rhythm that could only belong to one person, Vivian. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but something in me had shifted overnight, a steel rod replacing what had once been a bent wire. I opened the door. Vivian stood there in her designer pantsuit, not a hair out of place despite the early hour. Her expression was a familiar mix of disappointment and irritation. Finally, she said, pushing past me into the apartment, "You left in the middle of Jackson's celebration. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? And then you didn't answer any of our calls or texts." I closed the door slowly, taking a deep breath before turning to face her. "Hello, Vivian." She blinked, caught off guard by my formality. "What did you just call me?" "Vivian," I repeated calmly. "That's your name, isn't it?" Her eyes narrowed, taking in my packed bag, the leather box on the coffee table, the star pendant at my neck. Understanding dawned on her face, followed quickly by anger. "Eleanor," she hissed. "She had no right." "She had every right," I countered. "She was Sophia's friend, too." The name hung in the air between us like smoke. Vivian's face paled. "So now you know," she said, finally, her voice tight. "And what? You're running away?" Typical Maya, always so dramatic. "I'm not running away," I said. "I'm taking time to process the fact that the people who raised me have been lying to me my entire life." "Lying?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "We gave you everything. A home, an education, opportunities. Accept the truth," I cut in. "Accept my mother's name. Accept my heritage, my history, my identity." Vivian's perfectly manicured hand clutched her designer purse strap. "We were trying to protect you. From what? From knowing I was loved? From knowing my mother wanted me? From knowing I wasn't just some obligation you took on?" Her silence was answer enough. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice softer now, genuine curiosity replacing anger. "Why take me in if you didn't want me?" Vivian looked away, her gaze landing on a photo on my side table, one of the rare family pictures where everyone was smiling, including me. It had been taken at Jackson's college graduation. "Sophia was my best friend," she said finally. "We grew up together, shared everything. When she got pregnant, I was happy for her, even though..." She trailed off. "Even though you were struggling with fertility," I finished. She nodded stiffly. "When she died, it seemed like fate. Here I was, desperate for a child, and here you were, needing a mother. It felt right at the time, until Jackson came along." Vivian didn't deny it. Having my own child was different. I didn't expect it to be, but it was. She looked at me directly for perhaps the first time in years. "You've always been so independent, Maya, so self-sufficient. Jackson needed me more." I almost laughed at the absurdity. I'd made myself self-sufficient because I had to, because no one else was going to pick me up when I fell, cheer me on when I succeeded, comfort me when I cried. "Did you ever love me?" The question escaped before I could stop it, childlike in its simplicity. Something flickered across Vivian's face, regret perhaps, or a shadow of the person she might have been in another life. "I tried," she said quietly, "in my way." We stood in silence, 28 years of misunderstandings and missed connections filling the space between us. "What happens now?" she finally asked, unconsciously echoing my earlier question to Eleanor. I don't know, I answered honestly. I need time to figure that out, she nodded, adjusting her purse on her shoulder, a nervous gesture I'd seen countless times. Will you let us know where you're going? No, I said firmly. I need space, Vivian, real space. She flinched slightly at my use of her name again, but didn't correct me. Richard will want to talk to you. Richard has had 28 years to talk to me, I pointed out. He can wait a little longer. As I showed her to the door, she paused on the threshold, looking smaller somehow, less certain than I'd ever seen her. For what it's worth, she said, not quite meeting my eyes, Sophia would be proud of the woman you've become. The words hung between us, the first genuine thing she'd ever said about my mother. Thank you, I said simply. After she left, I stood for a long moment in my quiet apartment, feeling the weight of the star pendant against my skin. Then I picked up my bag, the leather box of memories, and walked out, locking the door behind me. I drove north along the coast, windows down, the scent of salt and freedom filling the car. I had no particular destination in mind, just a need to put distance between myself and the life I'd been living. 3 hours later, I found myself in a small seaside town I'd never visited before. A bed and breakfast with a vacancy sign caught my eye, a Victorian-style house painted blue with white trim, overlooking the Pacific. The owner, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, showed me to a room on the second floor with a private balcony facing the ocean. Just one? She asked as she handed me the key. Just me, I confirmed. Well, sometimes that's the best company, she said with a wink. Breakfast is from 7 to 10. The tide's coming in now if you want to catch it. Left alone, I unpacked Sophia's box on the bed, arranging her photos, letters, and journal like pieces of a puzzle I was finally putting together. I opened her journal to an entry I hadn't read yet. August 3, 1995. My little star, the doctor says, you're a girl. I knew it somehow, mother's intuition, I guess. I've been thinking about names, and I keep coming back to Maya. Maya Angelou's words got me through some of the darkest days after your father died. You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. That's what I want for you, my daughter. The strength to rise always. I felt you hiccup today. Such a strange, magical sensation. I sang to you in Spanish, the lullabies my mother used to sing to me. I hope you'll be proud of your Cuban heritage someday, that you'll want to know where your family came from, the struggles and triumphs that led to you. I bought a tiny silver star charm today to add to my necklace. One for each of us, 2 stars finding our way in the vast universe. Te quiero con todo mi corazón. Mom, I touched the star pendant at my neck, one of the pair she'd mentioned. I wondered what had happened to the second star, the one meant for her. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I stepped onto the balcony, Sophia's journal still in my hand, and watched as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Te quiero también, Mama, I whispered to the stars, the Spanish words unfamiliar on my tongue but somehow right. I love you too, Mom. For the first time in my life, I felt completely honest about who I was, or at least who I was becoming. No longer Maya Chen, the afterthought, the almost daughter, the not quite fit. Now I was Maya Rivera, named for a poet, daughter of an astrophysicist, made of stardust and stories and strength. I was only beginning to discover. The ocean crashed against the shore below, a rhythm as ancient as the stars above. Tomorrow, I would begin to learn about my Cuban heritage, maybe find some local Cuban food, look up Spanish lessons online. Tomorrow, I would start building a life that honored both the mother I'd lost and the woman I was becoming. But tonight, I simply existed under the stars that had witnessed my mother's dreams for me, feeling for the first time that I belonged exactly where I was, not because someone else had placed me there, but because I had chosen it for myself. I woke to the sound of waves and seagulls, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling above me. Then it all came rushing back: Bellini's, the banner, Eleanor, Sophia, the drive up the coast, my new reality. Sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains, illuminating Sophia's photographs spread across the bedside table. I picked up my favorite, her holding me as a newborn, looking exhausted but radiant, her finger caught in my tiny grip. Buenos dias, mama, I whispered, testing the Spanish words on my tongue. Breakfast at the B&B was served on a wraparound porch facing the ocean. The owner, who introduced herself as Martha, brought me fresh coffee and blueberry pancakes. "Sleep well?" she asked, refilling my mug without waiting for an answer. "Better than I have in years," I admitted. It was true, I'd fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep, as if my body recognized I was finally on the right path. "This place has that effect," Martha said with a knowing smile. "Something about the sea air and the distance from whatever you're running from." I nearly choked on my coffee. "That obvious, huh? Honey, I've been running this place for 30 years. I know the look." She patted my shoulder. "Take your time. The ocean's not going anywhere." After breakfast, I walked barefoot along the shoreline, letting the cold Pacific water wash over my toes. The beach was nearly empty, just a few early morning joggers, and an old man walking his dog, perfect for thinking. I pulled out my phone, turned off since yesterday's conversation with Vivian. 16 missed calls, 27 text messages, 3 voicemails, most from Vivian and Jackson, 1 from Richard, surprisingly. I opened Richard's voicemail first, curious what the eternally silent man might have to say. "Maya, it's Dad. Call me back. Not on the house phone. My cell. Just call me." His voice sounded different, strained, almost vulnerable. I felt a flicker of curiosity, but pushed it aside. Whatever Richard wanted could wait. This time was for me. I turned my phone off again and continued walking, focusing on the sensation of sand between my toes, the rhythm of the waves, the vastness of the horizon where water met sky. Hours later, salt-crusted and sun-warmed, I returned to the B&B and opened my laptop. It was time to learn about the heritage that had been kept from me. I started with basic searches: Cuban culture, Cuban traditions, Cuban food. Each result opened a new window into a world I'd never known was mine. Vibrant music, rich history, complex politics, incredible cuisine. I bookmarked websites about Cuban history and language learning resources. One search led to another, and soon I found myself looking at academic journals, searching for Sofia Rivera astrophysics. The third result made my heart skip: Stellar Formation in Dwarf Galaxies, New Perspectives, by Sofia Rivera, University of California, Berkeley, 1994. My mother's work, her research, her mind. I downloaded the paper immediately, though much of the technical language was beyond me. Still, seeing her name in print, recognizing phrases she'd used in her journals, it was another piece of her, another connection. A knock at my door interrupted my research spiral. "Package for you," Martha called through the door. Puzzled, I opened it. Martha handed me a padded envelope. "Came by courier," she explained. "Must be important." The return address was Eleanor's. Inside was a slim black device that looked like an old MP3 player, along with a handwritten note. "Maya, found this while going through more of Sophia's things. Thought you should have it right away." It's her voice recorder from grad school, mostly research notes. But there are personal recordings too. The last one is from the day before she died. "Take care of yourself. Call if you need anything. Love, Eleanor." My hands trembled as I turned on the device. It still worked, battery barely holding a charge after all these years. I scrolled through the recordings, labeled meticulously by date. Research notes: Stellar Formation, meeting with advisor. Follow-up: birthday ideas for Caroline, letter to Maya. Draft, and, finally, for Maya when I'm gone. My heart pounding. I pressed play on the last recording. Static crackled, then cleared. And there was her voice, the same voice from the videos, but softer now, intimate, as if she were speaking directly to me. "Mi Estrelita, my Maya. If you're listening to this, then something's happened to me. I pray you never have to hear this recording, that I'll be there to tell you these things myself. But life has taught me to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. I'm recording this because lately, I've had this strange feeling, like a shadow at the edge of my vision. Maybe it's just new mom anxiety. Maybe it's lack of sleep you're teething, and neither of us has slept properly in days. But if my intuition is right, if something happens to me, I need you to know these things. First, none of this is your fault. Children often blame themselves when parents leave. But my love, if I'm gone, It's nothing you did or didn't do. Second, I've arranged for Vivian and Richard to care for you if anything happens. They're struggling to have a baby themselves, and I know Vivian will love you like her own. She promised me. You'll be safe with them, surrounded by people who love you. I paused the recording, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. If only she had known how wrong she was about Vivian's capacity to love someone else's child. I pressed play again, needing to hear the rest. Third, remember that you are my greatest accomplishment. Not my research, not my degrees, you. Every time you look at the stars, know that the same forces that created them created you. You are cosmic, miraculous, perfect. And finally, me, Estrelita, live a life that makes you happy. Not what others expect of you, not what you think I would have wanted. What brings you joy? That's all I've ever wanted for you. Ti amo con todo mi corazón. I love you with all my heart. Always and forever. The recording ended with a soft kiss sound, then silence. I sat motionless, tears streaming down my face. For 28 years, I'd lived without knowing this voice, this love, this unconditional acceptance. For 28 years, I'd tried to earn love from people incapable of giving it freely. And all this time, my mother's love had been waiting for me, preserved in journals and recordings and photographs, in the star pendant around my neck, in the very marrow of my bones. I played the recording again, and again, and again, until her voice felt etched into my memory, until I could close my eyes and hear her, as if she were sitting beside me. As the afternoon light softened into evening, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on, scrolling past Vivian's and Jackson's messages until I found Richard's number. The call connected on the third ring. Maya? His voice was hesitant, almost fearful. I got your message, I said, keeping my tone neutral. A heavy pause. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm fine. Just needed some space. Maya, there are things you need to know. Things Vivian doesn't. He lowered his voice. I can't talk now. Can I meet you somewhere? Anywhere you want. I considered hanging up, shutting him out the way I'd been shut out for years. But curiosity won out. I'm up the coast. Haven Cove. I know it. There's a coffee shop on Main Street, Harbor Cup. Tomorrow, noon? Fine, Maya. He hesitated. Thank you. I ended the call, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Richard had never been cruel like Vivian, but his silence, his passive acceptance of how I was treated, that had hurt in its own way. Still, something in his voice suggested he had pieces of the puzzle I was still missing, and I wanted the whole picture, no matter how painful. The next morning, I arrived at Harbor Cup 30 minutes early, choosing a table with a clear view of both the entrance and the escape routes, a habit I hadn't realized I'd developed from years of navigating uncomfortable family dynamics. I ordered a Cuban coffee, my small act of connection to a heritage I was just beginning to explore. It arrived sweet and strong, nothing like the bland lattes I usually ordered. At precisely noon, Richard walked in. He'd always been punctual, one of his few definable traits in my memory. He spotted me immediately but hesitated at the door, as if gathering courage. He looked older than he had at dinner 2 nights ago, gray streaking his dark hair, lines deeper around his eyes. He'd always been the background character in the Chen family drama, present, but rarely participating, watching but rarely intervening. Maya, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. Thank you for meeting me. I nodded, waiting. For once, he could do the work of carrying the conversation. He ordered black coffee, then sat in uncomfortable silence until it arrived. I didn't help him. I've been a coward, he finally said, staring into his mug. All these years, I've been a coward. Yes, I agreed simply. He winced, but continued. Vivian told me you know about Sophia. I know Sophia was my mother. I know she died when I was a baby. I know Vivian was supposed to love me like her own, and failed spectacularly. My voice was even, controlled. Richard nodded, eyes still downcast. There's more. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. What do you mean? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. Sophia wasn't just Vivian's friend. I took the photo. 3 teenagers smiled back at me, a younger Vivian in the middle, her arms around 2 others. On her right was clearly Sophia, my mother, her smile bright and familiar. On the left was. "That's you," I said, surprised. Richard was rarely in our family photos, always the one behind the camera. "We all grew up together in San Diego," he said quietly. "The three of us were inseparable through high school. Sophia and I dated briefly junior year, but then she and Vivian became closer, and I stepped back. I studied the photo. You loved her, Sophia." He didn't deny it. We all loved each other, in different ways. But yes, I loved Sophia. Even after she met Daniel in college, even after they got engaged. Part of me always loved her. My mind raced, connecting dots. Does Vivian know that I loved Sophia? Yes, that's why. He trailed off. Why what? Why she was so determined that you would never know about Sophia. She was afraid. That you'd love me more than Jackson, I finished. Understanding dawning, because I'm Sophia's daughter. Richard finally met my eyes, his own shining with unshed tears. "I've always loved you, Maya, from the moment Sophia placed you in my arms at the hospital. But Vivian, she could sense it. After Jackson was born, she made it clear that showing you special treatment would end our marriage. So you chose her. And Jackson." He flinched. "I tried to love you both equally. I failed." "I know that now." We sat in silence, the noise of the coffee shop washing over us. The revelation should have been earth-shattering, but instead it just made perfect, sad sense. Of course Vivian's coldness toward me stemmed from jealousy. Of course Richard's distance was a compromise to keep his marriage intact. "There's something else," Richard said finally. "Something Vivian doesn't know." He pulled out a small velvet pouch and slid it across the table. "Before Sophia died, she asked me to keep something safe for you. She said to give it to you when you turned 18. But Vivian was so adamant about erasing Sophia from your life. I couldn't find the courage. My fingers trembled as I opened the pouch. Inside was a small silver star charm, identical to the gold one around my neck. It's the other half of the pair," Richard explained. "Sophia wore the gold one. This one was meant for you." I held the tiny star in my palm, overwhelmed by its significance. "All these years, you've kept this hidden?" He nodded, shame evident in every line of his face. "In my desk drawer at work. I would take it out sometimes. Think about giving it to you. Every birthday, every Christmas. But I always put it back. Why tell me now?" "Because it's time I stopped being a coward," he said simply. "Because you deserve the truth, all of it. And because," he hesitated, "because I've left Vivian. After the dinner, after what they did to you with that banner, I couldn't stay silent anymore." I stared at him, shocked. In all my childhood memories, Richard and Vivian were a unit. Inseparable, if not particularly affectionate. "Where are you staying?" "Hotel downtown for now. I've taken a leave of absence from work, trying to figure out what's next." He looked suddenly older, more vulnerable. "I don't expect forgiveness, Maya. I just wanted you to know that you were always loved. By Sophia most of all, but by me too, in my flawed, cowardly way." I slipped the silver star onto my necklace beside its gold twin. The two stars clinked softly against each other, reunited after 28 years. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said honestly, "but I'm glad to know the truth." Richard nodded, accepting this as more than he deserved. We finished our coffees in a silence that wasn't exactly comfortable, but wasn't as tense as before. As we stood to leave, he hesitated, then pulled out one more item, a business card. "If you're interested in connecting with your heritage, this is a Cuban cultural center in the city. They offer language classes, cooking workshops, community events. I used to donate to them anonymously every year on your birthday. Another secret act of love, too little and too late, but something nonetheless." I took the card, tucking it into my pocket next to the velvet pouch. "Thank you." Outside the coffee shop, Richard looked like he wanted to hug me, but didn't dare. Instead, he simply said, "You look so much like her. She would be incredibly proud of the woman you've become." As I watched him walk away, shoulders slightly stooped as if carrying a weight he'd held for too long, I felt neither anger nor forgiveness, just a quiet understanding of how love and fear can twist people into versions of themselves they never meant to become. Back at the B&B, I sat on the balcony, watching the sunset, the twin stars cool against my skin. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what life might have been like with Sophia holiday traditions. I might have learned lullabies in Spanish, bedtime stories about the cosmos. But alongside that ache of what could have been, I felt something new taking root, not just grief for what I'd lost, but possibility for what I might still discover. My story hadn't ended with Sophia's death or with the Chen's deception. In many ways, it was just beginning. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "The Truth in the Envelope, My Journey to Find Sofia Rivera," and then I began to write. "The Truth in the Envelope, Part 5. The words flowed from my fingers like water breaking through a dam, years of unspoken thoughts and newly discovered truths pouring onto the screen. Writing about Sophia, about my journey, felt like having a conversation with her across time. With each paragraph, I felt closer to the mother I'd never known. 2 weeks had passed since I'd fled Bellini's. My vacation time from the clinic had been extended after a brief call with my supervisor, who heard something in my voice that needed no explanation. "Take all the time you need, Maya," she'd said. "Your patients will be here when you're ready." Martha had become something of a confidant, bringing me extra coffee as I typed on the balcony each morning, occasionally sitting with me to share stories of her own complicated family history. "Found families," she'd told me one evening as we watched the sunset. "Sometimes they're more real than the ones we're born into." I thought about this as I scrolled through the website for the Cuban Cultural Center that Richard had recommended. They were hosting a weekend festival celebrating Cuban heritage music, food, art, and community. Something inside me quickened at the thought. Before I could overthink it, I registered for the event and booked a hotel in the city for the weekend. It was time to step beyond learning about my heritage through a screen. Time to experience it with all my senses. The night before I was set to leave, Eleanor called. "How are you, my dear?" Her voice was warm, concerned. I paused, realizing there was no simple answer. "I'm finding my way." "Richard told me you met with him," she said. "He also mentioned he's left Vivian." "Yes," I confirmed. "It's all a bit much to process." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Have you spoken to Jackson?" The question caught me off guard. In all the revelations about my mother, my heritage, my past, I'd barely thought about my not brother. "No," I admitted. I turned my phone off after Richard left. "He's been calling me," Eleanor said carefully, "asking about you." A flash of irritation sparked through me. Let me guess, Vivian sent him to get information. Actually, I don't think she knows he's called. He seemed concerned in his way. Jackson, concerned about me? The concept was so foreign, it took me a moment to process. What did he want? To know if you were okay. To understand what happened. I think. Eleanor hesitated. "I think he genuinely doesn't understand why you left." Of course he didn't. Jackson had never had to question his place in the world, his right to belong, his worthiness of love. The golden child, the real son, never having to earn what was freely given. "He wants to meet you," Eleanor continued. "Just the two of you." I thought about refusing, about cutting all ties with the Chen family and starting fresh. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or the stubborn hope that had kept me trying to belong for 28 years, made me say, "Where and when?" He suggested the pier near your apartment. Tomorrow afternoon. The timing would work. I could stop there on my way to the city for the Cuban festival. Fine. Tell him 2 p.m. After hanging up, I sat on the balcony watching the stars, my mother's twin star charms cool against my skin. What did Jackson want? What could he possibly have to say that would matter now? Morning came too quickly. I packed my bags, thanked Martha with a genuine hug, and promised to return someday. The drive back south along the coast felt different than my journey north. Had been less like fleeing, more like advancing purposefully towards something new. I arrived at the pier 30 minutes early, needing time to center myself before seeing Jackson. The familiar boardwalk stretched out over the Pacific, seagulls swooping overhead, salt air filling my lungs. I'd come here often during my years with the Chens, finding peace in the constant rhythm of the waves when family dinners became too tense. At precisely 2 p.m., I spotted him walking toward me, tall, confident, his expensive watch catching the sunlight. Jackson had always moved through the world, as if it had been designed with him in mind. In many ways, his world had been. "Maya," he said as he approached, his expression unreadable. Jackson, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He shifted uncomfortably, unaccustomed to being the uncertain one in our dynamic. You look different. I almost smiled. I was wearing the same jeans and sweater I'd worn dozens of times before. What was different wasn't my appearance, but the way I held myself spine straight, eyes level, no longer trying to make myself smaller to fit into spaces never meant for me. Why did you want to meet? I asked directly. He leaned against the pier railing, looking out at the horizon rather than at me. Dad left Mom. I know. Because of you. A hint of the old accusation crept into his voice. Because of choices they both made long before I was born, I corrected calmly. He fell silent for a moment, watching a sailboat in the distance. Was it really that bad? Growing up with us? The question was so unexpectedly vulnerable that it caught me off guard. I studied his profile, the brother who wasn't my brother, the boy who had absorbed all the love that might have been divided between us. Do you really want to know, Jackson? Or do you want me to say it was all in my head so you can go back to your celebration banner and your DNA test results without feeling guilty? He flinched. That was Mom's idea, the banner. But you went along with it. I go along with a lot of things. He turned to face me finally. That's what you never understood, Maya. Being Daryl's son comes with expectations, crushing ones. I almost laughed at the absurdity Jackson claiming victimhood after a lifetime of privilege, but something in his eyes stopped me. For the first time, I wondered what it had been like for him, growing up as the repository of all Vivian's hopes and dreams, all her frustrated ambitions. I never hated you, he said quietly. I envied you sometimes. Envied me? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Your freedom. You were already such a disappointment to them that you could do whatever you wanted. I had to be perfect grades, perfect career, perfect life. One misstep and Mom would give me that look, like I was wasting the miracle of my existence. I absorbed this new perspective slowly. It didn't erase the years of neglect I'd experienced, but it added dimension to a story I'd thought I understood completely. Why are you telling me this now? Jackson ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way I'd never seen before. Because everything's falling apart. Dad's gone. Mom's a wreck. The family is. He gestured vaguely. And I realized I don't even know who my sister is. I'm not your sister, I said, but gently. Not biologically. You're the only sister I've ever had, he countered, blood test or not. We stood in silence, the weight of our shared but separate childhoods between us. I have questions, he finally said. About your mother, your real mother. About why you left. About everything. I hesitated. Jackson had never shown interest in my life, my feelings, my experiences. Was this genuine or another performance? I'm on my way to something important, I told him. A Cuban cultural festival in the city. My mother, Sophia, was Cuban. I'm trying to connect with that part of my heritage. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. I didn't know that. No one bothered to tell me either, I said. I just found out 2 weeks ago. He looked down at his expensive shoes, then back up at me with uncharacteristic hesitation. Could I come with you? To the festival? Not to intrude, just to understand. My immediate instinct was to refuse. This journey was mine, this discovery of my roots, personal and sacred. But something about his request felt important, a crack in the perfect facade, a glimpse of the person he might be without Vivian's expectations weighing him down. Why Jackson? Why now? He seemed to struggle with his answer. Because I've lost my father. I might lose my mother to her bitterness. I don't want to lose my sister too, even if she's not technically my sister. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But all I saw was uncertainty, vulnerability, and something that might have been hope. It's a 3-hour drive, I said finally. If you're coming, we leave now. A slow smile spread across his face, not his usual confident smirk, but something more genuine. I'll follow in my car. As we pulled away from the pier, I caught a glimpse of him in my rearview mirror, his BMW following my modest Honda. An unlikely caravan heading toward an even more unlikely shared experience. The festival grounds were alive with color and sound when we arrived, the irresistible rhythm of Cuban music floating on the air, mingled with laughter and the scent of sizzling food. For a moment, we both stood at the entrance, taking it all in. This is part of who you are, Jackson said. Not a question, but a realization. A part I never knew, I confirmed. We moved through the festival together, an unlikely pair. I found myself drawn to everything, the music that somehow felt familiar in my bones, the art that spoke to me in colors and shapes I'd always loved, the faces that sometimes mirrored features I recognized from my own reflection. At a cultural information booth, an older woman noticed me studying a map of Cuba. "First time connecting with your roots?" she asked kindly. "Yes," I admitted. "My mother was Cuban, but I never knew her." The woman smiled. "But she knew you, and her blood runs in your veins, her culture in your soul, even if you're just discovering it now." She invited us to join a dance workshop happening nearby. Jackson looked terrified at the prospect, but surprisingly, he followed me into the circle forming on the grass. "I don't dance," he whispered urgently, as the instructor began demonstrating basic salsa steps. "Neither do I," I whispered back. "Let's be bad at it together." And somehow, awkwardly at first, but with increasing abandon, we danced. Jackson, who had never let himself look foolish in public, stumbled and laughed at himself. I, who had spent a lifetime trying not to be noticed, felt the rhythm catch in my body, natural and free. Later, over plates of ropa vieja and sweet plantains, we sat in comfortable silence. The afternoon light cast everything in a golden glow, and for a moment, I could almost imagine Sophia there with us, showing me the foods she'd grown up eating, teaching me the words for things in Spanish. She would have been an amazing mom, I said quietly, more to myself than to Jackson. He set down his fork. "Tell me about her, please." And so I did. I told him about Sophia's love of astrophysics, her pregnancy journal, her voice recordings. I told him about Daniel, the father I'd never known. I showed him the twin stars around my neck and explained their meaning. He listened without interrupting, his expression softening with each story. "I wish I'd known her," he said when I finished. "I wish we'd grown up knowing the truth." "Me too. I'm sorry, Maya," he said suddenly, for the banner, for never seeing how hard it was for you, for being so wrapped up in being the perfect son that I couldn't be a decent brother. The apology was unexpected, and I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of understanding. "Where do we go from here?" he asked. I looked around at the festival, at the celebration of a heritage that was finally mine to claim. "I don't know exactly, but I know I'm going to keep learning about Sophia, about my Cuban roots. I'm going to build a life that honors all parts of who I am. And us, you and me?" I considered this carefully. "I think we start over. Not as the children Vivian and Richard raised, but as two people with a complicated shared history who might, someday, become friends." He nodded slowly. "I'd like that." As the sun began to set, the festival lights came on, transforming the grounds into a magical landscape of color and shadow. A band took the main stage, the opening notes of their first song sending a ripple of excitement through the crowd. "Stay for the concert?" I suggested. Jackson checked his watch, a lifetime habit of scheduled commitments and obligations, then deliberately unbuckled it and slipped it into his pocket. "I'm in no rush," he said. We found a spot on the grass, among families and friends, all there to celebrate a culture that was now, irrevocably, part of my story. As the music washed over us, I closed my eyes and felt Sophia's stars against my skin. "I'm here, Mama," I thought. "I found my way back to you." The next morning, I woke early in my hotel room, filled with a sense of purpose I'd never felt before. I opened my laptop and returned to the document I'd started at the B&B. The truth in the envelope, my journey to find Sophia Rivera. I began typing, adding yesterday's experiences to the narrative that was becoming not just Sophia's story or my story, but our story, a thread connecting past to present to future. I wrote about Jackson's unexpected vulnerability, about dancing salsa for the first time, about the woman at the information booth who told me my mother's culture lived in my soul even when I didn't know it was there. As I typed, one realized I was no longer writing just for myself. This story deserved to be shared with other adoptees searching for identity, with families keeping secrets that needed to be spoken, with anyone who had ever felt they didn't belong. I wrote until my fingers ached, until the story had a shape and a heartbeat of its own. When I finally sat back, the sun was high in the sky, and I knew what my next steps would be. I would return to my apartment and my job, healing children as I healed myself. I would take Spanish lessons at the Cuban Cultural Center. I would frame Sophia's photographs and place them proudly on my walls. I would learn to cook the foods of my heritage, listen to the music of my ancestors, and dance without caring who was watching. I would contact Eleanor and build a relationship with her based on truth rather than secrets. I would give Richard a chance to be in my life as a person rather than a failed father figure. I would see if whatever was beginning with Jackson could grow into something genuine. And maybe someday, I would reach out to Vivian not for forgiveness or reconciliation, but for closure for both of us. As for the Chins, they would always be part of my story, but they would no longer define it. My identity wasn't something that could be granted or withheld by a last name or a DNA test or a banner at a restaurant. I was Maya Rivera Chin, daughter of Sophia, physical therapist, writer, dancer in training, stargazer. I contained multitudes. I belonged to myself. I closed my laptop and touched the twin stars at my neck, gold and silver, past and present, loss and discovery. Gracious, Mama, I whispered to the woman who had loved me enough to prepare for a future she wouldn't see. I found my way home. Story 2, everybody put up their hands, one by one. Gabriel, my sister-in-law, stood there grinning like a judge, as though this were a harmless game. She posed the query in a casual manner. Does Alicia need to be excluded from family gatherings? People raised their hands. My in-laws, my father-in-law, my cousins and wives, all save one hand, grandfather, Joss. My kid Luca was clinging to me as I sat there motionless. Confused, he looked about. The quiet was broken by his little voice. Why are they acting this way, Mom? I didn't respond. I just stood up, grinned, despite the pain in my eyes, and thanked them for the lunch. With dignity, we departed. The following week, each of them got a letter from a law firm, but I didn't fight back. Something within entirely silenced them. In the past, Sundays had a distinct meaning. They were raucous and full of fun before my husband Micah passed away. Children jogging through the yard with their bare feet, the aroma of freshly baked garlic bread. Brielle tried to get Grandpa Joe to stop playing outdated country music on his portable speaker. Sundays were the loudest stillness I had ever experienced after Micah's injury. Everyone was friendly at first. They delivered dinners to my house. Brielle arrived with embraces that smelled like her favorite lavender perfume and store-bought casseroles. Carol and Robert, my in-laws, demanded that I remain near my relatives, but the sympathy waned over the months. The texts became shorter, calls ceased, the invitations vanished. No one had ever argued with me. I never made any demands. I didn't make any noise. I just quit being helpful. I became aware that I had been welcomed at that point, as Micah's wife, not as family, not with him. All I did was remind them of what they had lost, or perhaps what they were unwilling to confront. He never stopped asking, though, Luca. When his father passed away, he was just 7. Even at 10 years old, he still had Micah's dimples and smile, and the same silent method of people watching. He asked once, Mom, why does Grandma no longer call us? Perhaps they were simply busy, I informed him. Perhaps they were unsure on how to discuss Daddy. I could sense the sadness seeping into his little chest, even though he nodded. I was unable to make up for the way he missed them, and I made the decision to try again for him. Therefore, it would be lovely to meet you and Luca on Sunday, when Brielle unexpectedly messaged me one Thursday over family supper. I went cold. I went over the paragraph 5 times again. It had the feel of bait, but when I informed Lucas, his countenance brightened. That was all that was required. We were 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Their home was immaculate. A magazine spread would be more appropriate than a toy. Brielle was waiting for us at the door. Hugs and smiles everywhere. She touched my cheek and remarked, "You look great." She had a control and lavender scent. To play, Luca ran inside. I took it all in as I followed more slowly. When I came into the kitchen, Carol hardly gave me a glance. She was preparing her iced tea by chopping lemons, acting as though she hadn't abruptly stopped talking as soon as I entered. From his seat in the den, Robert nodded to me. The football game is already back in the spotlight. Nobody expressed gratitude for our presence. I volunteered to help prepare dinner. After receiving the salad dish, he hurried out of the kitchen. Speak. Carol and Brielle continued making jokes about things I wasn't involved in. Still, I grinned. I had become proficient at that over the years. I was grinning in inappropriate places. I saw Luca at the children's table when supper was served. He was served first by Brielle, followed by the others. I had to acquire a plate by reaching around the dishes when it was my time. The little things added up. Around me, there was a lot of conversation. Promotions at work, updates from the school, plans for a vacation. Nobody ever inquired about Luca's well-being or myself. We felt like attendees at a celebration to which we had not received an official invitation. Grandpa Joe provided the lone tender moment. Even though he was now using a cane and moved slowly, his presence remained constant. He passed the bread and took a seat next to me. He responded softly, "I'm glad you came. Luca must understand that he still has a place. You also do, even though they aren't aware of it yet." The knot in my throat was swallowed. At the right moment, he always managed to say precisely what I needed to hear. I turned to face Luca. He and his cousin Levi were giggling. His dish was heaped high, hopeful eyes. What I saw, he did not see. When I entered a room, the air changed, but he was unaware of it. As a youngster, he had the highest regard for others, and I didn't want to deprive him of that. I grinned as a result. I told myself I could handle just one supper, so I kept silent. However, what followed would shatter that stillness and reveal everything I had made a concerted effort to ignore. After dessert, it took place. Plates were still strewn with crumbs at the big dining table, glasses half filled. For a brief moment, I believed I might have made it when the kids fled to the basement. Perhaps I had made it through the night. Brielle got to her feet at that moment. She used a spoon to tap her glass. As if in one, everyone looked to her. I assumed she would disclose something, perhaps some family news. I forced a grin and sat up taller. Then she said it. "We should discuss the conflict in this household, in my opinion." As if she were doing everyone a favor, she stated it. A theatrical exhale, a supportive look to her spouse. She surveyed the table with practiced anxiety. "I am aware that this feeling of uneasiness is not unique to me, and I believe that we must be truthful about its origins." Her meaning was unclear to me. I sensed it, even though no one first paid me any attention. My chest constricted. She went on, "I don't mean to cause any drama, but I think it's safe to say that since Hillary came back to us, things haven't felt the same." She called me by name for the first time, as if I were the most important person in the room. As if I weren't seated there. "I'm not implying that you haven't experienced a lot." She turned to face me and said, "Micah was missed by all of us. We all adored him. However, we've also had to go forward, and I believe that some of us feel like we have to tread carefully all the time. A few of us." I had to look around. Carol refused to look at me. Robert folded his arms and reclined in his chair. Some cousins were twitching, seeming to reposition cutlery. Brielle then grinned. I will always remember that smile. I assumed that we could just cast our votes, no animosity, only a hand signal. Should Allura not be invited to any further family gatherings? For the sake of harmony. I briefly believed I had misheard her. It seemed as if I had departed from my body. Then it took place. Carol raised one hand, then another, Robert, Levi's father, followed by his mother. Even those with whom I had not talked during the evening. Even those who didn't appear to give a damn. With the exception of Grandpa Joe, all hands went up. I was having trouble breathing. The blood in my face surged forth. I had ringing in my ears. Then I sensed my sleeve being pulled. Luca. He had returned from the basement, most likely to request another piece of cake. Rather, he had entered this. Confused, he looked about. Then he turned to face me. "Mom?" Softly, he said. "What are they doing?" I was devastated by that. I had a response, not because I didn't have one. In front of him, I simply couldn't say it. I made an effort to grin. My mouth quivered. I grabbed his hand and got to my feet. "I appreciate the supper." I addressed the table. I spoke quietly, yet firmly. "We ought to go." I was not stopped. Not a single word was spoken. Grandpa Joe got up from his chair and put a kind hand on my shoulder as we left. He murmured, "You don't deserve this." I gave a single nod and continued to go. All the way to the car, I kept Luca's hand firmly in mine. He made no more inquiries. As I belted him in, he just laid his head on my arm. I drove quietly home, the type of quiet that resides deep within you. I spent hours that night sitting in the dark, listening to my son's breathing while he slept next to me. I was aware that Brielle had planned that. It was her plan, practiced it, built it up over several months, if not more. Peace was not what she wanted me to leave. She wanted my erasure, as well as this vote. She gave a performance, her brief display of strength, and I gave it to her. However, she was unaware of it. None of them realized that I wouldn't remain silent indefinitely. I didn't yell, I didn't plead. However, I had had enough of portraying the bereaved widow who understood her role. I took the next step. Except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the cadence of Luca's breathing next to me, the home was still that evening. He was nestled up to my side, sleeping. He continued to hold onto my shirt sleeve with one hand as if he was worried I would vanish. My eyes were wide open as I lay there in the dark, gazing up at the ceiling. Everything was repeated in my memory. The hands were lifted in Brielle's speech. Luca's query, "What are they doing?" I had suppressed my pride for years in order to maintain peace. I would allow them to gradually push me away, persuading myself that it was honorable to remain silent, that it was better to stay silent than to be the issue. It wasn't simply a nasty vote, though. It was calculated. It was intended to make me look foolish in front of everyone. It was intended to demonstrate to Luca that his mother was not a part of the family that she had formerly supported, and I couldn't let it happen. Being cautious not to wake him, I crept out of bed. I didn't sip the tea I brewed. Rather, the first opened my laptop and retrieved a folder that had voice recordings, old images, and text messages that I hadn't touched in years. I read over the exchanges I had saved from Brielle's habit messages, which had previously felt passive-aggressive but now felt purposeful. I was drawn to one. "You are not required to attend Luca's recital. It might be uncomfortable for everyone. It's probably best if you just drop him off at the party." According to another Carol, the other children will find it simpler. It wasn't until I viewed it this way that I realized how long the distance had been occurring. Message after message, one kind suggestion at a time, erasing me. I launched my note-taking app and began writing. I mentioned everything, even the vote, the hushed remarks about my parenting, and the way they kept me out of family matters. I recalled Brielle saying things like, "You can be so sensitive," or "We all feel a little uncomfortable around Elira." I was struck. This was more than a personal matter. It was a pattern that might be contested in court. By morning, I had located an internet legal company that focused on reputational harm and family harassment. I sent in a consultation request. In less than a day, I was talking to Danica Rhodes, a shrewd, composed lawyer who didn't hesitate to listen to me explain what had transpired. She remarked, "I don't think they expect you to push back." "No, they don't. But I'm not doing this for myself," I said. "My son is the reason I'm doing it." Danica went over the texts. She played the sound. I had forgotten that Luca's wristwatch could record voice messages, so I was unaware that we had done so. Nearly everything from that evening had been captured. The voice of Brielle suggesting the vote, the uncomfortable quiet, the precise words she used, and the moment my name was called. In any case, she is too weak to defend herself. Danica reclined in her seat. "We're going to attach documentation, but we'll draft a cease and desist letter. We'll be clear that this goes beyond hurt feelings. It has to do with intentional harm, leaving a child out, manipulation of a minor's emotions." For the first time in years, I let out a breath. Not that I felt helpless. We also talked about the next steps and how to formally bar family members who fostered an unsafe emotional environment from seeing Luca. It was not a dispute over custody. It served as a warning. Danica's team sent the letter 2 days later. Each family member received their own sealed copy. It wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, but it hit like a thunderclap. And suddenly all the people who had voted to push me out went completely silent. The letters were delivered on a Thursday morning. Each one signed, sealed, and stamped from Rhodes and Kitchen. Family law addressed individually to every adult who had raised their hand. I didn't tell anyone they were coming. I didn't post anything online or send warning texts. I went about my day as usual, made breakfast, packed Luca's lunch, took him to school, yet there was a peculiar peace in my chest, a quiet awareness that something irreparable had been started in motion. By lunchtime, the call started. First, a missed call from Carol, then 2 text messages from Robert. "We must speak. This has gone too far." I didn't respond. At 1:23 p.m., Brielle texted me. "Really? A lawyer? What is wrong with you?" Then 5 minutes later, "You're really gonna break this family apart over a silly dinner?" Still, I said nothing because it wasn't simply a supper, and she knew it. Danica had written in a straightforward, assured, and legally sound manner inside the letter. It described a pattern of purposeful humiliation in front of a youngster, emotional manipulation, and intentional exclusion. It included verbatim quotes from the smartwatch recording, timestamps, and individual SMS messages. It was bolded when Brielle declared she wasn't strong enough to defend herself. It also contained a caution that Luca should not be subjected to any further attempts to isolate Alicia or to foster an emotionally unfriendly atmosphere. A formal complaint with Child Protective Services and a court request to restrict his unsupervised contact would be the following steps. The hardest-hitting section, the last paragraph of the letter. This company stands in for a mother who has previously opted to keep quiet in order to maintain family unity. She is no longer prepared to provide that quiet as a gift. Every single individual who had raised their hand fell silent within a day. Nobody made an effort to justify the vote. Nobody questioned the authenticity of the audio. They were all aware of their actions. I received a handwritten note in my mailbox on Friday. There is only a folded card inside, no return address. Carol sent it. I apologize for the incident. We didn't anticipate you going this far. We could have been mistaken about you. I put it in the drawer next to my wedding ring after reading it once. Grandpa Joe phoned your attorney shortly after, giving them all heart attacks. With a quiet laugh, he said, "Silent as a mouse, Riles. She is deserving of worse." "She does," I said. He concurred. "Still, I'm proud of you." Luca inquired as to whether we will be returning to their home that weekend. I gave him a glance. This sensitive and courageous youngster had witnessed more evil in a single night than most people had in years. "No," I responded, "sweetheart. Not for some time." He grinned after nodding. "It's all right. Can we instead to the beach?" "Yes," I said. "The beach sounds ideal." The letter was sent out 3 months ago. No attempt has been made to arrange another vote. Nobody has apologized or extended an invitation for us to return. Not in person, anyhow. The quiet hasn't only persisted, the volume has increased. But I feel free for the first time in years. I don't wake up worrying what went wrong or dreading texts. I don't mentally brace myself for another backhanded remark or cold shoulder that is passed off as being sincere. I no longer have to shrink when I enter a room. Above everything else, Luca is safe. Better than mediocre. He no longer inquires about the cousins. He stopped searching the mailbox for unanswered birthday cards. We have since established new customs that are not predicated on maintaining harmony with those who attempted to eradicate us, but on spreading happiness with those that actually care. We get donuts and take a stroll around the lake trail outside our flat every Sunday morning. He has his sketchbook with him. I bring coffee. We discuss school, cartoons, space, or whatever else he wants, as we sit on the bench where Micah used to take him when he was a toddler. There is only tranquility, no faking, no anxiety. Additionally, I've been attending therapy. I had never seen that before. I formerly believed that therapy was just for those who were unable to maintain their composure. I now understand that it is intended for those who are trying to keep themselves together, yet do not wish to suffer in quiet. I was assisted by my therapist in naming what transpired that evening. Not only exclusion, but manipulation, emotional assault, and the type of bullying that adults cover up with dinner parties and smiles. She helped me realize that the vote wasn't an unexpected betrayal, and that I wasn't insane or overreacting. It was the last in a long line of disrespectful behavior. Something I didn't even realize was broken was fixed by that insight. Nevertheless, I no longer feel furious. When I wake up, I don't wish I could make them feel the same way they made me. Nobody discusses how healing renders retaliation pointless. Their lives were too important to me to damage. I wanted my son to grow up with a mother who could truly demonstrate what strength looks like. Screaming at a table full of people who have already made up their minds is hardly a sign of strength. Being able to demand respect even when you leave the room is a sign of strength. Some may claim that I overreacted and that it was just a vote when the door closes behind you. However, you are aware of how loud that silence can be. If you have ever sat silently in a room full of people who act as though you don't belong. I wasn't being theatrical when I took legal action. I took this action to establish a limit that words could not. In actuality, I showed them compassion and empathy for years. I allowed them to treat me like a human being, as if I were their grandson's mother. In response, they acted in a brutal yet polite manner. They assumed that my quiet was a sign of weakness, so they relied on it. They were mistaken. Additionally, I've learned something new. Sacred family is not. Someone doesn't have the right to treat you badly just because it runs in the family. DNA and names don't justify modification, and being loyal does not entail putting up with suffering. Family is created, selected, merited. Even now, Grandpa Joe still visits on Saturdays. He delivers sugar cookies from the local bakery, and he and Luca play chess poorly. He doesn't discuss the others at all, and I never inquire. Luca asked me last week whether I thought they missed us. I stopped. Perhaps, I said, but just because you miss someone doesn't mean you treated them well. He returned to coloring after nodding. He's becoming wiser than the majority of grown-ups I know. My tale isn't about being locked out, despite what I formerly believed. It's about leaving and understanding that I didn't lose a family member. We're now constructing a better one after I managed to escape one, not more loudly, not larger, but safer, nicer, and entirely ours. If you have ever been the silent person in the room, the one who undervalued the person who opted for peace over retaliation, this tale may have struck a chord with you. I therefore hope that this gives you some strength. Walking away isn't always a sign of weakness. It's the loudest power available. If this adventure resonated with you, would you kindly like the video? Leave a comment below and forward it to someone who should hear it. Did you ever have to leave a family to save your peace? Additionally, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you would want to see more real-life tales like this one, stories about resilience, recovery, and discovering your voice. We can continue to tell important stories thanks to your support. I appreciate you being here. To feel like we belong, we don't need a room full of people. All we need is one place to be heard.